By far the biggest breakout star of this year's playoffs has been Anthony Edwards. And this dude was already an all-star, going to be an all-NBA team member. But his play in this year's postseason has hoisted him into another stratosphere. And to this point, he's getting comparisons to Michael Jeffrey Jordan and being regarded as the future face of the NBA. And the great thing about Edwards, unlike some stars, this dude plays both ends of the court and plays hard. And look at the first two games versus Denver. Offensively, 35 points per game on 61% shooting. Absolutely ridiculous. But defensively, just as impressive, as in the first two games combined, holding his opponents to 5-19 shooting from the field. And whatever you want to call it, I guess killer mentality, Mamba mentality, that kind of cutthroat attitude. Edwards, he has that. And too long over the past decade, we've tossed aside things like killer mentality in favor of VORP, PIPM, a player's raptor, and their plus-minus squared minus their shot distance times 3. Just random advanced stats analytics that in the grand scheme of things don't matter. And I'd say looking at the media as well as fans, a lot of people embrace Edwards as the future face of the NBA. But one guy who's got his pants in a knot, who's kind of pissed about this, is of course Nick Wright, as his booth in LeBron James is out of the playoffs and being pushed to the side. I mean, look at this tweet from Nick Wright during Game 2 versus Denver. He brought up Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen after Ant Edwards hit the shrug on a three-pointer. I mean, this dude is a straight clown. Michael Jordan in 2024 in the middle of a playoff game is at the top of his mind. And look at the actual tweet. The same old BS, same old nonsense. Well, Jordan minus Pippen couldn't win anything. He was nothing without Scottie. And this, I mean, we've gone over 1,000 times, not going to do it again. But logic like this is just so flawed. As even looking at Ant Edwards adding zero context, you can do the same thing. Because Ant in the playoffs never won a series till he got Rudy Gobert. And at this point in his career, hasn't made the postseason minus Karl Anthony Towns. Of course, that line of thinking, that line of criticism is just downright stupid. But in the future, when they're comparing Ant versus LeBron James, Ant versus the all-time greats, that narrative, I guarantee you, will come up yet again. And one more reason Nick Wright is pissed is Anthony Edwards being compared to Michael Jordan and not LeBron James. I mean, think about that. LeBron is still active and playing, just got bounced in the playoffs. And already, the future face of the NBA is replacing him in real time. And ask yourself, why is that? Is it because Jordan and Edwards are so similar? Maybe so. But also, Michael Jordan is the gold standard for player comparisons. I mean, even Kobe still to this day gets more player comparisons than LeBron James. The only guy who dubbed LeBron James Jr. was, of course, Ben Simmons.
I asked him, what do you have to get back to? He said, without a doubt, executing the way we did in the first.
Inside. James ahead of the back, goes up. Oh, he lost
one of the best defensive teams in the league.
That's a good shot, but
the moment I sat down, I thought I was looking into a mirror.
And looking back at Michael Jordan, there were superstar players, all-star players, when they got on the court, were in fear of Michael Jordan. I mean, MJ had that it factor, that intimidation that made players tremble. And when you played against him, you weren't just beating the Bulls, but also the myth of Michael Jordan. What I saw from Ant in Game 2 versus Denver, I saw him walk into the defending champ's house, snatch their soul, and have these dudes shook on the basketball court. I mean, Jamal Murray, Jokic, Aaron Gordon, guys who are NBA champions, they were unraveling like cheap toilet paper. And like Mike Tyson said back in the day, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And Minnesota in this game threw the first punch, second punch, and the third punch for the knockout. And while I'm not going to count Denver out yet, it's only 2 games in this series. At this point, you can feel the vibe of the NBA definitely shifting, as guys like Ant Edwards, Luka, Tatum, kind of the younger generation finally, is rising up and taking over as their league. And looking back at LeBron James, even Kendrick Perkins, the biggest LeBron fan possibly alive, is telling this dude to retire on the spot because, quote, he's ruining his own legacy.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I believe this in my soul right now. I wish LeBron James will retire. The more LeBron James continue to play the game of basketball, the more it's going to hurt his legacy. and the more it's going to continue to hurt his GOAT argument.
For Kendrick Perkins to say that is definitely pretty astounding, but it goes to show the media. They'll pick favorites here and there, they'll run with a guy for a decade, and then when he finishes, toss him the curb and forget about him. And for LeBron James the past decade plus, 24/7, 365, he's the focus, the center, the GOAT debate versus Michael Jordan. But then along comes Ant Edwards, and boom, LeBron tossed aside, Ant Edwards front and center, you're the face of the NBA, and the next Jordan. I don't want to understate this. Kendrick Perkins has pushed LeBron James to the side in favor of Anthony Edwards. The league is changing, guys. And Edwards being compared to Jordan, of course, not a perfect one-to-one. But what it does prove once again is that Michael Jordan is the gold standard and the greatest player in NBA history. As Adam Silver, much like David Stern, for the past 10 years, has been looking frantically for the next Jordan. And of course, we had Kobe, then LeBron, kind of a bad era, now possibly Anthony Edwards to fill that void. Now, will he fill MJ's shoes, Kobe's shoes? To be determined. But the overall contrast between Jordan's era, Kobe's era, and the potential Anthony Edwards era is a stark contrast to the LeBron James era. And you might ask, what's the LeBron James era? I'd say 2011 to 2020. The era of super teams, collusion, and players teaming up and being buddy-buddy. That, in my view, makes the LeBron James era the worst era in NBA history. And why I'm so confident in the next era is the superstar players coming up and already established. These guys are staying with one team for an extended period. Of course, Nikola Jokic, he's in Denver, Luka, Dallas, Giannis, Milwaukee, Tatum, Boston, and Edwards, Minnesota, then someone like SGA in Oklahoma City. If these guys set the precedent that switching teams, forming super teams, is just not the way to go about things, the NBA in the next decade would change drastically and change for the better. As player empowerment in the long run hurt the NBA, despite some players having a short-term gain. And looking back at Edwards, one thing I admire about him, unlike some superstars, LeBron James, this guy on the court is confident, he's braggadocious, borderline arrogant. But off the court, he's humble and respectful of past NBA legends. As even Edwards himself said, being compared to Jordan is an honor, but just stop doing it, he's not on that level. That is a stark contrast from the LeBron James mentality and the mentality of self-promotion. And looking at Edwards and Jordan as actual basketball players, like I said in past videos, the high-flying dunks, the defense, the mentality, that's all there. But even more important, the way these guys score is at all three levels. As looking at Ant in this year's playoffs, at the rim, shooting 70% from the field, which ranks 11th in the playoffs. From the mid-range, 50%, that ranks 8th, and from threes, 41.9%, and a 7th in attempts taken. That right there from Edwards is a great balance at all three levels. And of course, the efficiency is top-notch. Now, looking at Michael Jordan, a prime Jordan, it is very much in the ballpark of someone like Anthony Edwards in 2024. As looking at Jordan scoring at the rim, 74%. From the mid-range, 51%, and even from three, 38.3%. A lot of fans nowadays say Jordan, he couldn't shoot threes, didn't have that jumper, but if you watch the games, look at the data. Jordan's shot in the playoffs specifically was always there. And looking at isolation scoring, Edwards and Jordan once again, very, very similar. As Ant in this year's playoffs, 1.14 points possession, that ranks 4th. Percentage-wise, 54%. Jordan in his prime, right there, 54%, at 1.23 points per possession. I mean, the fact Michael Jordan's ISO numbers were that good in the 90s is pretty fascinating. Now, last thing I'll compare these two on is post-up scoring. Now, Edwards in this year's playoffs, a very small sample size, ranks 1st in points per possession. And percentage-wise, shooting 71%, which is patently absurd. Now, looking at Jordan in his prime, a much bigger sample size. Percentage-wise, 53%, and points per possession, 1.19. Like with ISO scoring, Jordan's post-up play, even for the modern era, is at the top tier of players in the postseason. Now, looking past those numbers, those stats, which again are fantastic, if you watch these two guys play, mid-range scoring, post-up scoring, isolation, in transition to fast break, Jordan Edwards, very, very similar. And the eye test, when you watch Kobe watch Jordan, what stands out? Those guys in the half court in transition, their movements were fluid, and they're just visually appealing. And for the longest time, this era of NBA players, they've dominated in two ways. Either layups and dunks, fast break points, or three-pointers. And look, while it's great to shoot threes, great to get easy dunks, the way Edwards plays, Kobe plays, the way Jordan plays, it makes the game 10 times more exciting. And when you see players like Luka Doncic, John Morant, SGA, even Wembanyama being compared to Michael Jordan, who retired 20 years ago, what does that tell you? Michael Jordan still is the gold standard, the GOAT, and most influential player of all time. And long story short, look in the next era of basketball, I am very, very optimistic. So that right there is the end of the video. As always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.